We're
Yes.
back, and we're bigger than ever.
Bigger than ever. You guys thought we were done. We were dead. We're just another group of guys not succeeding in their podcasting dreams. But no, here we are, season 2, ready to do it right now.
As we said we never would, here we are once again.
Yep, back in the throne.
I had a few people asking me about the podcast, like what's going on with it. So we do have a few listeners.
I participated in a game night last night, and a couple that was there asked me about the podcast. Now, I will say they also were like, well, yeah, we listened to the first episode and like never listened to another one. And the first one's the worst, y'all. Don't listen to it. Skip the first one.
The first few, I was too drunk. It just didn't work.
You were too drunk. That is factual.
That's fine.
It's okay.
Podcast is just an excuse to drink anyway.
Yeah, but we should take episode 1 down. It's like bad.
It's that bad? Wow. Okay, maybe
or,
we'll consider it.
Or we'll just put it behind a paywall like all the other successful podcasters. If you want our bad content, you got to pay for it. But we're gonna be doing The Shining this week.
Oh
Braden.
yeah.
This is like
movie. This has always been probably my favorite horror movie, I would have to say, since I was a child. That's right, I first watched this as a child. And it left quite the impact on me.
I did too. Like, turning down long hallways was like a trouble for a while after this. After, I guess, the first viewing, which I would say was too young. Sorry, Mom.
Way too young. Way too young.
Sorry,
Not
Mom.
to give anything away, but the naked woman, the hot, sexy titty woman.
Well,
those were some of the first breasts I'd ever seen, and I'm scarred. I was scarred by that experience because I'd been on the edge of my seat at that point. We'll get there.
We'll get there. Yeah. Sorry, Mom. Thanks, Dad. But yeah, it was one of the first. It's one of the first horror movies I ever saw that like really impacted me.
Absolutely.
It's my favorite horror movie beside The Thing, which are just coincidentally my 2 favorite movies because horror is my favorite genre. But yeah, this is a masterpiece. It's an absolute masterpiece of a film.
As are basically most of Stanley Kubrick's films.
Yeah, pretty much all of them. You know, genius.
This is the second one we've actually done on the podcast. The first being A Clockwork Orange, which I prefer The Shining to A Clockwork Orange. Greatly, honestly.
I do as well. If like for no other reason that ridiculous Cockney, Praetorian or whatever Prussian accent thing they do in it. Like I've seen the movie so many times, I still don't know what they're saying half the time. I don't know. But anyways, yeah, The Shining is my favorite of Kubrick's offerings. Obviously, there's a bunch of good choices there. Eyes Wide Shut is another one that I think is particularly awesome. If I'm even like allowed to talk about that on a podcast and not like get a knock on my door or whatever. Kubrick knew. He knew about the pedophiles. Anyways, The Shining. I'm sorry, I had to say it. He did. This is what the movie's about. Anyways.
We don't need another Pizzagate here, Andrew.
You're right. I don't want to be... I don't want to... Yeah. Good call. But The Shining is... I think it is Kubrick's best film.
It's up there. I mean, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Come on. I would say The Shining had the most impact on me just because I saw it so young. And also it stands out because it's a really great horror film. And I feel like that is a genre where just so many shitty ones just get pumped out.
A lot of schlock. There is a lot of schlock in horror. And that is what I think makes The Shining stand out. Like it is a like masterpiece film in a genre that my favorite genre, the genre I love, often has a lot of like, B flicks, which is a wonderful thing again. But it is what kind of sets it apart from a lot of other horror.
Oh yeah, here you have a film-making master, one of the masters, tackling the the genre of horror, and almost every one of his films went into a different genre, actually. But
Yeah.
you just don't always have that filmmakers of that caliber going into that genre.
So, like, on that note, Kubrick decided to do a horror film because Barry Lyndon, which is a beautiful film but a kind of boring film, was a commercial not success. So, following that, Kubrick realized he needed to do something that would be commercially viable and also, like, be artistically worthwhile. And that is, like, why he landed on doing horror. So he had like a bunch of assistants bring him just like boxes and boxes of horror books, and as the story goes, his secretary would just hear him throwing books against the wall after reading just like a few pages, and this went on for hours, if not days. And eventually, she just like noticed that like she hadn't heard a thud in a while, and she like went in there, and that's when she like saw him totally engrossed in The Shining.
Awesome. And of course, The Shining is written by Stephen King, who I know is an author you've read quite a few of books of his, right?
Yeah, King is one of my all-time favorites. I we'll talk more about Stephen King in relation to this film, but yeah, absolutely one of my all-time favorite horror writers. If for nothing else, he just churned out such a huge body of work. Like, it would be a challenge to read every single Stephen King work.
Where does this one fall in the chronology of his books? Like, this is one of his earlier ones, I want to say, right?
Yeah, I want to say it was written in 77, but I could be wrong about that. Yeah, no, it was 77. It was written in 77.
Nice, and obviously the movie came out in 1980, so it was a new book at that time.
Yeah, but King was slinging them out at that point,
The story was actually inspired when Stephen King stayed in a hotel that no one was in for a night right before it was going to close for the season, and it sounded pretty creepy. I mean, I guess that's where the inspiration came from.
I mean, have you ever been somewhere where there should be like a lot of people and there aren't any people? It is like a little unnerving. In and of
I'm
itself.
not down with that. I'm not down with that. I wouldn't even live in a house that's too big for that reason. Just no need.
Agreed. We're just going to live in shacks for the rest of our lives.
Exactly. That's how I cope existentially with the fact that I have to live in a shack.
That you
It's
don't
my
have,
choice. It's my choice.
That you don't have a 12-bedroom house.
Yeah, because they're
Who
scary.
needs that?
They're scary, man.
They are. Especially, I would love an old mansion. This is a little bit of a tangent. I would love an old mansion because I think like old buildings are cool. But like, how is it not haunted? And do I like want to live?
It definitely is. It definitely is.
It's got to be. It's got to be.
Okay, so going into this film,
Yeah.
we learn so the setting of the film is this hotel that's in Colorado. That's super remote. It's in Colorado, right?
Yes. So where the exterior shots of the hotel in the film were shot was not in Colorado. But the hotel that the story is based off of and the hotel in the story itself are in Colorado. And it's the Overlook Hotel is the name of the facility.
And at the very beginning of the movie, first off, the movie opens with these gorgeous helicopter Steadicam shots flying over the Rocky Mountains, showing their car going up this little highway.
It is. It's these beautiful aerial shots with the iconic dun 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 dun.
The music in this is amazing,
dude.
Honestly,
the soundtrack gives me chills down my spine. It's so good. But yeah, it's the aerial shots of the yellow beetle bug driving up to the hotel. Which we'll remember the yellow beetle bug. We will come back to that point.
Oh yeah.
Something else, like, kind of off topic, but related to these shots, outtakes, so footage from these shots that were not used for The Shining ended up being used for the original theatrical release of Blade Runner. The one that has, like, the dumb happy ending that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't totally get that. I mean, it doesn't. That shot, I just don't see how that would fit into the Blade Runner movie. But I mean,
Yeah.
I read that also. But
Have you ever seen the original theatrical? So not the director's cut, like the one that's like the DVD.
it's been a while because now it's always the director's cut is
Yeah,
on it.
the theatrical one, Harrison Ford and like the girl like escape off to the mountains, and it makes no sense with the tone of the movie or like you know any of the plot arcs.
I don't
that
know
were
that I
going
have
on.
seen that one. I really don't.
Yeah, you probably haven't because it's bad and it doesn't make sense and like it it doesn't exist basically anymore unless you like really hunt it down. But anyways, yeah, the outtakes of that shot were used in the original, probably because they were just lying around and it was already studio property. That's my guess.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Some good B-roll.
Yeah, some good B-roll. But the Beetle contains one Jack Torrance, one of the main characters. I would say he's the main character, even though you could argue he's kind of the antagonist.
Played by Jack Nicholson, who is one of my favorite actors of all time. Possibly my favorite.
Absolutely, and he was the first choice for the lead role. Followed by there were some other considerations. Robert De Niro was one. I want to say
Robert De Niro would have been good, but it would have been totally different. I mean, I can see it after watching. Have you seen Cape Fear?
I have seen Cape Fear.
He plays a good psycho, but
He
Jack
does.
Nicholson's performance unmatched.
So Robert De Niro said that the movie gave him nightmares for a month, talking about The Shining. But Harrison Ford was also a consideration as well as Robin Williams. But
Oh
Jack,
wow, Robin Williams is a good creepy guy too.
it could have been incredible. But Jack Nicholson was the first choice, and he got the role, which I'm very grateful for because I think is Jack Nicholson's best role.
One amazing thing about him is his baldness in this movie. I've never seen someone so unashamedly balding with the long hair. It adds to it so much. You know what I'm talking about?
I think it was like more in style in the 70s and 80s than it is now.
It
But
makes
yeah, I
him
do.
looking so insane.
It does. It does add to the craziness. Stephen King did not want Jack Nicholson because of Jack Nicholson's role in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He thought it would make the audience like kind of associate him with being crazy out the gate. Even though
interesting.
Jack Nicholson was not crazy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He was just a little bit rebellious. But anyways, so I think Stephen King wanted Michael Moriarty, John Voight, and Michael Sheen, but was informed that the choice of the lead role was non-negotiable once production had begun. Anyways, not to get off topic, but Jack Nicholson, I think it was the role of his career, and he
Kills it.
He kills it.
Kills it.
But so it's with one Jack Torrance driving up to the Overlook for his, I guess, interview for the role of caretaker of the lodge. So he like gets up there and he's walked in, and if any of our listeners have seen Room 237, they talk about it in that documentary, and if you haven't, you should absolutely watch it.
That's a documentary that's about The Shining and all these. Basically, The Shining. It has many subtexts and many layers, and people read all these different things into the film. And that documentary is basically about some of the conspiracy theories that people have about the movie. And I can't even think of another movie that has as many conspiracy theories about it as this one. I mean, they go deep. They go very deep.
They do. I mean, not all of them are conspiracy theories. Some of them are just like, thematic assessments. But yeah, there is some conspiracy theories as well.
There's some conspiracy theories, and some people are just reading into the filmmaker's intent. But he's really, to my knowledge, he's never actually spoken about what any of it means, or none of it was confirmed or denied.
Well, he hasn't, and he never will. Rest in peace, King. But
Well, actually, it's not. So many of the themes in the movie are different than themes in the book, and it almost seems like that was one of the contentions between Stephen King and Stanley Kubrick. Is Stanley Kubrick took the source material and then just totally put his own meaning on all of it. But we'll get there.
Correct. But in room 237, they talk about the layout of the hotel. So when Jack shows up for his interview, he like enters, he kind of takes like a slight right through, what would be like the valet, or, where you offload your luggage on a dolly or whatever they're called, whatever those things are called at hotels. But he takes a right, takes a left, and takes another right. And, like, per all the shots in the film, you see him go into a room, and, like, the room should have a hallway behind it. It should be an interior room. So, like, no exterior windows, no exterior wall touches it. But when he comes into the room, the man interviewing him, kind of like the head boss man of the hotel when it's in season, has a window with like this weird iridescent, like bright light coming through it, as well as another man sitting in there as he basically debriefs Jack on what the job is.
But a part of your brain knows there should not be a window there.
Correct. And then he casually informs Jack that a man lost his mind and axe murdered his family before blowing his head off with a shotgun. Like, talk about that as being a item on a job interview after you drove 3 hours out to the place for the interview.
Then they tell you.
That's
what I worry about when I buy a house. It's like, are they going to tell me like right after I like sign the motherfucker or what?
It's like, by the way, some psychopath, murdered everybody in here with sulfuric acid or something. I don't know. Something.
And they also learned that it's on an Indian burial ground. Compound those two things.
Well, allegedly,
it's haunted. It is haunted.
Like a good politician. The dude does look like a caricature of JFK almost. The man interviewing him, head boss man, whatever.
And it's interesting. It has to be mentioned, but on the internet, there are people who believe that one of the subliminal messages, because frankly, this movie is full of subliminal messages. And some of them can be confirmed, and then some of them I thought were more iffy. But in this scene, when the guy stands up, like his groin perfectly aligns with this like paper holder, and it looks like he has a big boner.
He does.
Which is interesting because that one, questionable. I don't know if that's intentional or not. But in another scene, right at the beginning, when he's with these people, they come into the hotel lobby and Jack is sitting there, Jack Nicholson's character, and he's reading a Playgirl magazine. And like when he, if you like look at a freeze frame from that scene, you can clearly see that it's Playgirl. And one of the articles is about incest. And some people have speculated that that's like Stanley Kubrick telling the audience that, oh, he's sexually abusing Danny, because Danny's the son, the creepy son.
Yeah, and like, put a pin in that, because as we get deeper into the movie, I want to come back to that point. But
some weird stuff. Right out the gate, some weird stuff's going on that if you're paying close attention, which, frankly, I missed basically all of this stuff. It reads on a subconscious level. And another thing I was reading about is that Stanley Kubrick actually, when he was researching this, which they spent a long time researching this movie, they researched the entire history of Colorado and the Native Americans, and we'll get there. But also what he'd researched is he went around to different ad agencies and was learning about the subliminal techniques they use to persuade people to buy their product, which gives, knowing that fact, and also having seen some of the subliminal messages with my own eyes, gives credence to the fact that he's just brainwashing us throughout the whole film.
I mean, if not outright brainwashing, like getting under your skin and maybe probing your mind in ways that wouldn't have been probed in any other traditional like way of filmmaking. Which
is what Stanley Kubrick's so good at.
It is what he's so good at. Probe my mind, Stanley. Probe it. So he, they do the interview, and again, the casual murder casual triple homicide suicide. We like cut over to the rest of the family, which is Wendy and Danny Torrance. Wendy being Jack's wife and Danny being his son.
Wendy, played by Shelley Duvall, another outstanding performance.
Absolutely. To get it out early, there has been a lot of criticism of Kubrick in the filming of this film due to his treatment of Shelley Duvall. He basically just fucked with her mind the entire time.
He psychologically traumatized her and to the verge of tears, and to actual tears, and then filmed it.
and then filmed it, and it is an incredible performance, but it does have that kind of stigma attached to it.
Well, she said that she got really sick and had all these health issues and had to recover from it. So that's kind of messed up. But as a consenting adult who's there for a job, she signed up for it, in my opinion, to a certain degree.
You're getting compensated, so I don't know, I've had people yell at me.
And then on that point,
for not that much.
On that point, also, another criticism of the film was that her character was just misogynistic. She's not a very strong woman by any means of the sense.
Well, and so especially in contrast to the novel, she is a particularly diminutive, kind of submissive character. But some people, also speculated that was intentional to highlight machismo as kind of being this pathway of evil, or at least something that's not so good. They could turn evil. So
interesting.
Yeah. So I hear it, but I do think that Shelley Duvall absolutely delivered an incredible. Her performance is just as good as Jack's.
It's rather great, and the whole movie is basically the performance of these two and the child. They're 95% of the movie. It's just them, and their performances drive the whole thing. And can we be totally honest? Her performance is basically her just trembling and looking afraid the whole time. She doesn't even say that much. She's just the whole time she's just looking. She's just trembling.
There's like a little chihuahua. No, she's got
a little chihuahua. Exactly.
But she's got good eyes too. The eyes, man, she conveys
huge alien eyes.
That's not very nice, Braden. I think that
that's a compliment in my book. You know that I love aliens.
You're right. You do love aliens.
That's a compliment.
That's your type. Everybody's got a type. Yours is just, extraterrestrial. But they cut over to the family, and basically, Danny has he's talking to Tony, which is he wiggles his finger and talks to an imaginary friend. The little boy that lives in his mouth is
creepy little kid. Man, if my child did that, straight to the doctor or something.
Well, he's talking in the mirror, and basically Tony doesn't want to go to the hotel, and Danny's like, well, why don't you want to go, Tony? And Tony won't tell him. And then it cuts to the iconic scene of the blood gushing out of the elevator. You know the scene. Everybody knows the scene with the blood. Oh,
that scene's awesome. Apparently, it took them a year to film that scene because they had to do it 4 or 5 times, and every time they did it, to clean it up took over a week. And the town that they were filming it in, the gutters were all running red because it was just that many gallons of blood. Pretty awesome.
Was it real blood?
No, it wasn't real blood. Interestingly enough, also, they couldn't get that put into the theatrical trailer because it would be shown to all ages. So eventually, Stanley Kubrick, he convinced them, quote unquote, that it was rust-colored water, and that's why they have ultimately approved it, which is just so dumb. That basically means he bribed them or something, I think.
He had to have bribed them, but who knows? bureaucracy could be dumb. Maybe somebody just put a stamp on it and out it went. Who knows? Who knows? But the scene with the blood gushing and, Danny has like an episode. They don't. It sounds kind of like a seizure, and I guess that's how I would characterize it. But Danny's mom finds him. Wendy finds Danny, and she calls in a physician to like check Danny out. And this is like, I think, it's like a scene that the first few times I watched the movie, it didn't like really stick with me any way or another. But with knowing like what we know about Kubrick, him being like a genius IQ level filmmaker,
yes, you go into this knowing everything is perfectly placed, everything is perfectly framed, every detail is meticulously crafted by him.
It's all very deliberate. So it's like this otherwise kind of like lukewarm scene, at least to like a young viewer's mind, or somebody who's maybe like just kind of, it's their first viewing, it's not particularly terrifying, but Danny's mom brings in a physician who checks him out and, says that physiologically everything's okay with the kid, and then, she asks him to stay in bed, and she and Wendy go out to the living room to talk, and she starts like asking about Tony, the imaginary friend or whatever that Danny talks to, and basically through like some probing, it comes out that Tony appeared about the time where Danny was injured, and when like Wendy says that he was hurt, and that's like kind of when it happened or whatever, the doctor's face gets like very grave, like very, very, very grave.
Because that's the first sign you have that there's some abuse happening.
Correct. And she asks, she pries further, and Wendy says, reveals that one night Jack had come home after drinking, and he came home late from work, and Danny had thrown some papers about, and Jack grabbed him and yanked his arm to like pull him away from the papers, is how Wendy describes it, and it dislocated his shoulder, which is a horrific injury. Dislocating your shoulder is the complications of that, and like just the physical pain is like much worse than most breaks, per my understanding.
Yeah, that's messed up. So we find out, take it as you will, but that's when the fits supposedly started happening. So,
or it's when Tony showed up. So that was like the first fit. The first fit is when Jack was at the Overlook Hotel, and Danny was asking Tony why he didn't like the hotel.
And if we weren't clear about Tony is someone who he says lives in his mouth and talks to him. And when Tony's talking, he moves his finger up and down, and it's creepy. It is creepy. Like, what would you do if your child was doing that? I'd send him away.
Away? I don't know about away, but he'd probably see a qualified professional.
I'd take him to an exorcist or something, man.
Yeah, maybe. And I guess like something else to give credence to the like possible sexual abuse end of what you were talking about earlier with the Playgirl magazine. In Dr. Sleep, in the book, spoiler alert if you haven't read it and you're going to read it, it's the first chapter. I don't know, sue me. But in the first chapter, after the events of The Shining, Dick Halloran, who survives in the book, is like talking to Danny. I just reveal that he dies, whatever. If you haven't seen The Shining and you're listening to this, I don't know what to say to you. Like, it's literally one of the most popular... It is the most popular horror movie probably of all time. And
just go watch it.
It's referenced in The Simpsons. Like, I mean...
they also reference some pretty obscure stuff as well.
It's referenced in, like, everything. Anyways, South Park. You name it. Whatever. But in Dr. Sleep, the novel and film... sequel essentially to The Shining, in the first chapter of the book, they don't talk about it in the movie, but in the first chapter, Dick Halloran's talking to Danny after the events of The Shining, and he's telling, kind of explaining The Shining more to him, and like telling him more about his childhood. And Dick Halloran lived with his grandparents, and his grandma, the one who had The Shining, was a sweet lady, but his grandfather was like a masochistic pedophile, more or less.
Oh wow.
So it's like, to give like an additional degree of credence to like perhaps there was, sexual abuse.
Interesting.
Being depicted.
Almost like The Shining might be some coping mechanism or something.
Possibly.
Is that what it's getting at?
I don't know if that's what it's trying to say directly, but like it is, incidental that Dick Halloran's character in Doctor Sleep almost definitely was abused, or was. I mean, in plain
All right,
text.
we're getting way ahead of ourselves here because we haven't introduced any of that yet.
Oh my God, you're so right. But anyways.
So the whole family is at the hotel. They're getting a tour of the hotel, and then they're introduced to a character named Dick Halloran, who I believe he's the chef of he's the head of the kitchen. And is that correct?
Correct. That is correct. That is correct. That is correct. You are correct.
So basically, Dick Halloran is with Danny and Wendy, and he calls Danny Doc. And Wendy's like, "How did you know he's called Doc? I haven't called him Doc." And I guess that is his nickname. He's like, "Oh, well, I must have just heard you say it or whatever." But then it zooms in on Danny, and Danny can hear Dick's thoughts, and Dick says, "Do you want some ice cream, Danny?" And they're communicating telepathically, I guess. And then later on, Dick sits down with Danny and is basically like, "Yes, I did do that. It's called Shining, and it basically, I've always had this power, telepathy, and it was passed down to me by my grandmother, and you have it too, and I knew when you walked in the room."
Yeah, and at this point, Danny kind of like, he's a little bit of a shy kid. I guess a lot of kids are shy, but I think he's shy from my perspective.
Oh, absolutely.
But he looks at Dick and he says, "Are you scared of this place?" And, Dick's basically tells him that just like people, some places can shine too. And he's like, a lot of bad things have happened here over the years, and there's just little traces of it left, basically. So, basically Dick says he's not scared of the hotel, but he tells Danny that some places, they have a little touch of something going on as well. He also says something that I think is interesting. He says, lots of people shine, but a lot of them, like, either don't believe it or just don't know they can do it.
That's interesting.
Or they're just, like, in denial, it is. And, I mean, it's, like, kind of the basis of the sequel, Dr. Sleep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
which, have you read or seen Dr. Sleep?
I've seen the film.
Okay. The book's good, too. Obviously, I'm going to plug Stephen King some more. But the movie was excellent, I thought.
Yeah, it was good.
For what it's worth.
It was good.
I mean,
really it's no The Shining, but, few are.
It checked a lot of boxes for me, personally. But anywho's, we're not talking about Dr. Sleep. We're talking about The Shining.
The Shining's a tough act to follow. It really is.
Yeah, that's fair.
But anyway, also at this point, while Dick is talking to Danny informs him about Tony in his mouth. And you can see Dick visibly, look frightened and, concerned about this, that Danny is hearing a voice that's telling him what to do.
100%. He's got, these... Dick is played by Scatman Crothers, and he's just got these incredibly, compassionate eyes in this scene.
Oh, he's amazing. He also has an incredible performance.
Incredible. He doesn't have as much screen time as Jack or Wendy, but he's concerned about this as well, which I think is interesting because if you're somebody who's psychic and possibly can experience and see paranormal things that most people can't, wouldn't it would be probably even more alarming to you if like a psychic child had a voice in his head, like what's going on there.
Sure.
But there's a moment where Danny says, "What's in room 237?" Again, nod to the documentary. But at this point, like what I take away from it is that like this illustrates something else that Danny's capable of, which is essentially reading somebody's mind.
Interesting.
There had been no mention whatsoever of room 237 up to this point.
Well, I thought maybe room 237 was shining to him or something along those lines as well.
And that's also a possibility that like the room was reaching out to him. But like I like to think personally, and I think it's like more evidenced in Dr. Sleep when we see an adult Danny and what his powers look like. But I think he does have like telepathic capabilities, which like means that he's like more aware of what's going on with the adults through like his psychic abilities. Like he's got a window, a purview into like what's going on with the adults, the only two people in this lodge. Which we glossed over this, but Jack's job at the hotel is he's just the caretaker during the off season, the winter months. It's too difficult to keep the road open. There's no ski slopes, so during the winter the hotel just shuts down, and he's been hired to mend stuff as it breaks and heat different sections of the hotel to keep the pipes from bursting, so on and so forth.
And he's a struggling writer, and his also part of what his goal is to finish his novel or write a novel while he's there. And he keeps fighting with his wife, and at a couple points he's even like, do you want me to go back to doing odd jobs and all of this, you know? Get a sense of like a lot's riding on the success of this novel.
Yeah, he's a struggling writer, and he's, again, he had a violent moment with his child under the influence of alcohol. I think it's kind of implied throughout the film that he'd lost his teaching job, presumably also because of his troubles with alcohol. He tells tells the hotel staff that the boss man that they don't drink and that he's been sober for 5 or 6 months. So I think it's implied that there was alcoholic based troubles afflicting like the family's financial well-being. And that's why he's taken this job. And to write the novel, if you were a novelist, that seems like a pretty good side gig to like pay the bills, whilst you write. But yeah, I think it is an important scene, at least from my interpretation of the film, because it gives us an idea that like, even though Danny's a child and he's got the mind of a child, he's got access into the adults' minds beyond even just the perception that a kid would normally have. And kids are perceptive. They're more perceptive than I think adults realize. So maybe that's a whole nother subject. I mean, Stephen King, a lot of his books center around children. Obviously It being the first thing that jumps to mind.
Sure.
But so, we when he brings up room 237, Dick gets like very serious, and basically tells him like, do not go into that room. So, listeners, remember that. That is, if it wasn't made clear, that is an important detail that we will come back to.
We'll get there.
So, yeah, like a month later, Jack's working on the novel. We get a lot of good exterior shots of the hotel, which was, again, not filmed in Colorado, Oregon, but it's just brutal out there. Like, the most brutal winter you could imagine. Just basically blizzard conditions all the time. But we start to see like Jack start to break. We see him, there's a scene where he's just like throwing a ball around in the lodge instead of like writing. He's like sleeping in real late, like Wendy brings.
Exactly. They make it very clear that no writing is getting done.
Yeah, he's not doing a fucking thing.
And at one point, Wendy actually comes into the room where he's doing the writing, and he freaks out on her, and he's like, never come in here, and all this stuff, which is interesting because that was not in the original screenplay. Actually, Jack Nicholson wrote that screen, and it was approved and put in by Stanley Kubrick.
And it's an intense
But-
scene.
It's an intense scene, and apparently, like, that's based off Jack Nicholson's real life when he was filming a movie during the day and would come back at night and write a screenplay. Like, that exact thing, same thing happened with him and his wife, where he, like, freaked out on her.
Very personal touch. But yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly harrowing scene. It's really where you start to see the fractures begin.
That he might be insane.
That he might be insane. And there's a lot of like really great scenes of Danny exploring the hotel on his tricycle. I would even call them the iconic scenes of the film. Just about.
Oh yeah, these have been parodied and referenced a million times. But he's going around the corners on his big wheel, and there's the twin girls and some other creepy stuff.
Yeah,
blood.
They used the Steadicam filming technique equipment to do these like iconic immersive shots. And I looked it up because I was like, what the hell is Steadicam? It's like this crazy harness system. Readers at home,
It's like a gyroscope, I believe.
yeah, but like you walk with it, like that's pretty cool.
And this was one of the first films ever to actually use that. I believe it was like the 7th or 8th film.
Yeah, it was created.
And they actually had the guy who invented it, like, operate it during the filming.
I mean, that's the one you want to do it, right? Like,
That's the one you want. But yeah, I mean, those create some iconic shots. And I was watching with my girlfriend, who knows nothing about cinematography, and she even pointed out, like, how did they do that? It's not shaking. There's no way someone's holding that.
yeah, it's super, super cool. And I believe it came out in 1975. That was when the Steadicam was first created and released. So yes, this was one of the earliest films to implement it. But we get the even, I guess, the adder to the iconic scene of the tricycle riding around when he rounds the corner and he sees the twins. The twins,
creepy little children.
yeah, the twins. Come play with us, Danny. Come play with us forever. Yeah, real creepy little girls holding their hands down at the end of the hallway. Again, aforementioned scarring and fear of hallways for me.
Yep. And they're clearly the children of the guy who went crazy and murdered his family with an axe many years ago.
Yeah, the prior caretaker.
In the 1920s or something.
No, it was more recent than that.
Oh, really?
Correct. So, and his name was Delbert Grady. So the Grady family. These are the Grady twins. So some people talking about the Grady twins, some critics and some other people who are in many ways close to the source, claim that the twins bear an extreme similarity to the twins photograph by Diane Arbus, including Arbus's like biographer. I believe Kubrick's assistant also said that there was a lot of similarities. In addition to that, Kubrick studied under Diane Arbus or worked under her at one point. However, Kubrick's widow firmly says that there is no relation, and he didn't base it off of that. But if you look at, like, if you pull up a picture of the photograph online on Google, listeners, I mean, they do look like pretty similar.
Interesting. I hadn't heard that, but I mean, it does kind of bring up the debate of, like, I mean, he studied under this person. What is the line between, like, an homage or, like, a straight ripoff,
I mean, it's a little different. The photograph's black and white, and the girls are kind of smiling. I guess the twins are kind of smiling. Before they do those, like, you were talking about the subliminal effects or, like, contents of the film. And, like, one of them that, emulates, like, something that when I think of subliminal messages, you think like something flashing, in just like a millisecond of a frame or whatever.
Sure.
But so here, even though it's slow enough and like very perceivable, they flash, from the girls holding hands to scenes of them, massacred with blood everywhere, like they'd been chopped up with an axe, which is the fate that befell them. That is like a very even if it is perceivable, I still think it has like a subliminal means of like getting under your skin. And that is by far not the only example in the film, but it's one of the most obvious ones.
Sure. Oh yeah, I mean every single scene just builds and builds and builds on your subconscious, from like the choice of how he painted the walls or to what paintings are hung on the wall. I mean, everything is intentional, to how the cans are arranged in the pantry.
Yeah. All right.
We'll get into that later.
Yeah, the Calumet can.
Oh yeah.
I love the patterns and all the imagery in the film. Like, you know, just thinking of the tricycle scene, just like the carpet patterns. You know, I guess it's modernist is what would be the appropriate genre to like tag it under, but very, very cool. It's got like an unsettling feeling about it itself, you know. At least, or maybe it's the film's made it unsettling for me. I don't know. Either way, cool scenes with the tricycle. Everybody loves those. Parodied to death.
Yeah, it's like a cliche at this point.
Something else that we see a lot of is like, and I noticed this, you know, a few years ago on my 15th viewing or whatever it was. But like Wendy's doing a lot of the job that Jack signed up for. Like you see her like in the boiler room, you know, checking gauges with a clipboard with her like overalls on. So that I would say that's like a counterpoint to like Wendy's a weak female character. Like she might be terrified of her husband, you know, who's losing his mind, but she's doing like basically, you know, what would have been classified certainly in the 70s and 80s as like a man's job, you know, the caretaker.
Sure, she's getting shit done.
She's the one getting shit done in the hotel. Fucking Jack is, you know, sleeping until noon and throwing a ball against the wall and, you know, smoking cigarettes at a typewriter doing fuck all. And I don't know. That's just like I would say to the critics who say that Wendy's a weak character. She's fucking out there getting it done.
She's killing it.
But, you know, we we can see that she's starting to get like concerned. Like she's checking in with the I guess it would be like the state trooper's office or something, some law enforcement office that has a radio, and that's like their only means of communication because all the phone lines are down. Which, you know, I think that's like also any at least, you know, I mean, who uses phone lines anymore? Everybody uses cell phones, but historically, like the phone lines go down, it's like, oh shit, stuff's starting to go awry.
Oh yeah, every movie
every movie ever. Trip time. So speaking of tricycle scenes, now we're like really getting into it. Danny on his tricycle stumbles upon room 237, which we've obviously brought up a bunch. But we see that when he comes to the room, the door is open with the key with the little tag 237's in it. And, you know, it's Danny. Danny goes in. So we don't see what happens to Danny while he's in room 237. But we cut to Wendy's walking through the hotel and she hears Jack screaming, and she comes into like the Great Hall, which is where Jack set his typewriter up at, which is like, I would do it too. It's a huge badass hall. It's like the biggest office in the world. But he's sitting there screaming, you know, in his sleep, slumped over at the typewriter. And when she wakes him up, he tells her that, you know, basically crying that he just had the worst dream of his life. He'd murdered Wendy and Danny and chopped them up into little bits. And, you know, she's like, she's trying to be nurturing towards him, and that's when Danny walks in with his thumb in his mouth. You can see immediately there's bruising around his neck, and his little Apollo 11 sweater is torn, which just like post-it note the Apollo 11 sweater for 2 seconds. But, you know, Wendy runs to Danny and accuses Jack of doing it to him, of you know, physically abusing, you know, if not.
Makes sense, right? I mean, there's a history of that. He's obviously showing signs of mental illness.
Yeah, he just told her he had a dream about murdering them and chopping them into little bits.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think rightfully so she assumes it, but it wasn't Jack, or at least that's, you can kind of tell from Jack's expression, because he looks dumbfounded and, maybe even questioning his own sanity at that point. But certainly, he's pissed off afterwards. And, we see him like walking down the hall, stomping, throwing his fists, and he comes upon the gold room, which is like the big ballroom of the hotel. And he goes in, turns the lights on. It's this beautiful, like, Art Deco, big flopper, extravagant party, freaking Bioshock-esque room. And he goes and sits at the bar, kind of like hangs his head down, rubs his head, and when he looks up, he starts smiling. And before him is a bartender in full get-up with a fully stocked bar behind him. Lloyd. So, he starts...
Which this person does not exist. Clearly a ghost or something.
Sure, but in this moment, like, maybe he does exist. It's tough to say, because Jack, he's... before Lloyd appears, he said he'd sell his soul for a goddamn beer. A glass of beer. But...
After having been sober for many years, I believe.
And I mean, I get it, dude. Like, you have a fucked up day. You want a beer. Even when I've, like...
You want to break that sobriety.
Yeah, you want to throw it all away and drink that beer. But I think it's interesting that he says that, and looks up, and before him is this, I mean, he looks like a very real person, but we would have to assume it's a specter, or it's the hotel manifesting itself, whatever the fuck it is, whatever you want to think it is. We'll go into what we both think it is at the end. But basically, Lloyd, he says, "Oh, I got some cash in my wallet. I was scared it was going to be there for, 3 more months. Give me, a bottle of bourbon, a glass, and two cubes of ice, and everything will be great." And, the liquor's poured for him. He pulls out his wallet, doesn't have any cash, and Lloyd says, "Oh, your credit's just fine here, sir." So, like, it's like right here, it's like where the hotel's kind of like beginning to enlist Jack.
Yeah. This is where shit gets bonkers, basically.
It's getting its hooks into him at this point. And Lloyd is very, very creepy. By the way, the scene, they filmed it from, I think, 9 a.m. until 10:30 p.m.
Wow.
Yeah, and the guy who played Lloyd was said he was drenched in sweat by the end. But it's his favorite scene of the whole movie, which, like, of course, he was in it.
I mean, infamously, this movie, some of the scenes took like over 140 takes and were just basically insane.
Yeah, but so this...
the worst filming experience you could imagine.
This is the first time Jack sees anything that could be perceived as supernatural. We'd already had Danny see the twins, but this is when... I think, like, as I said, the hotel's really got its hooks into him. So, after his little time, speaking with this phantom bartender, Wendy comes into the room and says that Danny told her that it was a woman. There was a crazy woman in room 237. And, Jack doesn't believe her, but agrees to go check it out. So now, like, we see the inside of the room 237 with, like, the... green carpet, and I mean, it's a beautiful room, as is the whole hotel. But Jack, like, wanders in kind of slowly.
Oh, this part's creepy.
Yeah, very cautiously.
This is the part that messed me up as a child.
Yeah, that's why
the most.
You can only get a hard on when you think of zombies now.
Yeah.
So Jack, like, walks in and slowly goes up, because it's like a suite. I mean, it's a baller room. There's like a whole living room area, bed.
It's a nice room, and it looks nice. Like, nothing out of the ordinary yet.
But he goes into the bathroom, which has these beautiful, like, drywall arched accents over the toilet and the tub, and you see, basically like a woman, a young, beautiful woman in the tub, and Jack kind of like locks up and is just staring in disbelief, because I mean, they're supposed to be the only ones there. I mean, I guess if you just stumbled upon a naked woman and she was receptive to that would be awe-inspiring in and of itself. But, like, again, they're supposed to be alone, in the hotel.
Well, he's all about it. He doesn't even hesitate.
No, I mean, well, he's like
He like walks forward and like embraces her basically.
he does. He's all struck at first, but she gets out of the tub kind of seductively, and he like slowly walks up and embraces her, and they start making out. And like the camera's like an over her shoulder shot of his face and like the side of her face, and it like slowly, you know, he opens his eyes and it pans backwards. Or actually, it shows the mirror shot of her back, and it's like all these like, you know, like rotted flesh, and it's like a bloated,
an old woman,
bloated,
with these legions all over her body.
yeah, bloated, saggy old woman corpse, and she starts like cackling at him. You know.
Oh man, that haunts me.
Yeah, and he like backs up and falls out down the stairs and gets the fuck out of the room as quickly as possible. She's cackling. It's one of the most like unnerving scenes of the whole thing, mixing the sexuality with the horror, which is a great. If you're making horror movies, you got to do it. It's the way it works.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, freaking throttle all those gas pedals. But when he returns to Wendy, he claims that there was nothing there, which is like, so, I mean, you know, maybe you don't want to tell your wife you just made out with a ghost woman, but like, I feel like at that point, any sane-ish person would be like, we got to get the fuck out of here, you know?
Oh no, he's like cooperating with the hotel at that point.
Oh, and before this, just to jump back, there's this weird scene where like Danny walks into the like their little like room, their family unit apartment, and he wants to get his fire truck, and his dad like asks him to sit up with him, and they like, you know, he hugs him, and that could be like innocent enough, and like kisses him on his head, which is like normal parent stuff, I suppose. But you know, he goes on to say that like Danny asks him what he thinks of the hotel, and he's like, I like it here, I love this place, you know. And it's like he goes on to say like, I would never hurt you, Danny, you know that, right? So, you know, juxtaposed with that, with him like coming back from a place where his child was, you know, as we could perceive it or assume from how the movie's going, his child was harmed by a ghost thing that he just had a weird fucked up interaction with. You know, you think he would be forthright with his wife about it, right? Like
You would think.
I would think so, but what do I know?
But even when he's saying that stuff to Danny, he looks real creepy. He looks messed up.
The score of the movie's like real creepy, you know, a bunch of like real shrill violence.
Super influential. Like if you watch like Hereditary or any of those movies, they're still like using the same sound effects from this.
Yeah, or the original Suspiria. Although I guess the original Suspiria was 3 years prior to this, which is a great flick for all you flickers out there. But yeah, it's like he tells Wendy he didn't see anything, and you know, she's starting to freak out. Things are starting to like get pretty tense in there, which, you know, leads us to what, you know, gosh, I keep saying iconic scenes are all iconic, but one of the most infamous sentences in all of film history. Wendy, you know, comes into the great hall where Jack had been working, and like finds his or looks at the typewriter and sees that all it says is "all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy," and then she starts like
over and over and millions of times.
And then she thumbs through all the paper that's in the bin beside the typewriter. So like the supposed novel he's been working on, and every page is just this, like formatted different ways. You know, it'd be printed every which way on there.
But clearly he's lost his fucking mind.
Yeah, he's out of...
And at this point, she just looks terrified.
Yeah. Oh, and I do think I'm getting, like, also just ahead of myself. He has another run-in with the ballroom after that. He goes back, and now it's filled with floppers, and people are dancing or whatever.
Here's my question about all this part. So, he meets the guy, and his name is... What's the guy's name? Something Grady.
Delbert Grady.
Delbert Grady. And he introduces himself. He says his name's Delbert Grady.
Well, this is after he spills the drinks on him, and he takes him to the bathroom, that red bathroom with like the white floors and it's like the, you know, very kind of unsettling red bathroom. And yeah, there the butler reveals that he's Delbert Grady, you know, the former caretaker who ruthlessly murdered his family. And when Jack like brings it up to him, he's like, "Oh no, sir, you've always been the caretaker here. I don't have any recollection of that happening."
Here's my question, not to get lost in the weeds here.
Yeah.
But like that party they were having, it was like 1920s or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end he goes, at the very end, total spoiler alert, he goes, like they show a photo of him and he's in the 1926 or something.
Yeah, he's in like...
Is that because he's like becoming, he's like, and he's the caretaker, and he's always been the caretaker according to Delbert Grady. Is that because he's like becoming Delbert Grady?
No, the way...
What was the tie-in with 1926? I thought that was when Delbert Grady murdered his family with the axe.
No, that was just when the big flopper parties were going on. Like, the hotel has, like, this rich history of being, you know, in the 20s, it was a site of, you know, America's wealthiest would come there to party during the summer, basically.
I see.
But, so, no, Delbert Grady was, you know, presumably in, like, the 60s or earlier in the 70s when it happened. It was in recent memory. Recent enough since, like, the current management of the hotel had him under their employ when it happened. So
I see.
So, like, the 20s is just, like, maybe a bigger imprint. And, like, in the novel, there's a lot of chapters that are about other characters, you know, prior to Jack's tenure at the hotel, you know, throughout the hotel's history. And, you know, the 20s was, like, a big section of it. But anyways, you know... the best explanation I ever heard of it, or like how I like to think of it now, I got from a good friend of mine. We watched this one snowy night a number of years ago, and when we wrapped it up, it's the best time to watch it. When we wrapped it up, he was like absorbed into the fabric of the hotel. Like, the hotel's like a sentient, you know, being of evil, whether it's because of the bad things that have happened there that have made it manifest or whatever, but like he's absorbed into the fabric of the hotel. And I like that. I think that's really good. I wish I could say that was like uniquely my thought, but it is the school of thought that I subscribe to now. So
makes sense.
Thanks, Devin.
And when we're talking about different events that have imprinted on that plot of land or whatever, whether it be the Indian burial ground, the first axe murders.
Yes. So
what Jack Torrance does to his family.
So as he talks to like Delbert more, you know, Delbert reveals that you know, like his son's like very strong-willed, and he's attempting to contact an outside, you know, person, where he basically at this point Jack's like using his shining to reach out to Dick Halloran, who's at his, you know, winter home in Miami or whatever. I think it's somewhere in Florida. I don't know if it's...
You mean Danny?
Yeah, Danny. Did I say Jack? Danny. Thanks for the correction there. But Delbert basically tells Jack that, like, you know, something is afoot. Your child is trying to, like, ruin things. And then he had said that he didn't remember murdering his family, but after that, in the same conversation, he's like... You know, when I first got here, my family didn't care for it either. He's like, one of my daughters even tried to burn the Overlook down with a match. He's like, but I corrected them. So, like, I don't know. It's weird that in the same conversation, he says, like, I don't remember, you know, butchering my family with an axe. But
I corrected them.
Yeah.
And then he's like, you need to correct your family, too. Yes,
exactly. So, at this point, it's like Jack begins to, you know, turn on his family. So, jumping back to Wendy finding... You know, the all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy manuscript. Jack appears, and he is visibly unhinged at this point.
Terrifying looking.
Yeah, and he's, you know, screaming at her, and, you know, basically this is like probably peak tormenting of Shelley Duvall, but she's just like crying and, you know, very poorly swinging a bat. She's so choked up on it. It's like, if you're gonna hit somebody, you want to like have your hands down at the handle of the bat, you know? You're not bunting a ball, you're trying to knock somebody's head off.
And this scene took like 127 takes or something, and this is the one where Stanley Kubrick was torturing her, literally.
Yeah, just being cruel.
And she looks tortured. And she's pretty good at crying.
She is. I mean,
and looking scared.
She looks like somebody who is genuinely scared for their absolute life in that scene. But they have this like, basically Jack like backs her up the big stairs in that like great lodge where he's been working, and she's swinging, and he's like, I don't want to hurt you, I just want to bash your brains in, so he's really fully unhinged, but it's like, room 237 draws similarities to that, and like, I guess like Mayan pyramids, and kind of like a human sacrifice like thing that like,
That was interesting. Seemed like a stretch for me, but
sure. I like the like cinematography of the stairs though. But as he keeps approaching,
it's awesome.
As he keeps approaching, Wendy somehow, despite her bad form, manages to crack Jack in the head and knock him unconscious.
Good for her.
And he falls down the stairs, and like it's a pretty big set of stairs. Like you'd probably die if you fell down them, or like break, have like a compound fracture. Is like my 2 cents on it. But he's fucked up, and she drags him into like the lockable storeroom in the kitchen, and basically locks him in there. From the outside, puts a shackled padlock over the door, and leaves and tries to begin getting her child and herself ready to flee the hotel. Now, before that, however, Jack had gone around and taken the fuses out of the CB radio that they had, and had also taken some mechanical component out of the snowcat.
Yeah, you find out he has sabotaged any chance of anyone escaping this hotel.
Yeah,
they're all trapped there.
As he like comes to in the room and like pleads with her to let him out, and she's like, "We're going," and he's like, "Oh, Wendy, you're in for a surprise," or something like that. I don't know, that's heavily paraphrased. Probably the most paraphrased thing I've said all night, but
something like that.
Something along those lines.
But then at some point, Jack comes to consciousness in the pantry. He's locked in, and he's communicating with Delbert Grady through the wall. So he's basically talking to Delbert Grady, and Delbert Grady's like, "Oh, your wife has turned out to be more of trouble than we expected," or whatever.
Yeah. So again, Wendy's maybe not that weak of a character, but whatever. Get off my soapbox.
Exactly. I mean, I think, we keep going back to that point. One of Stephen King's main problems with the movie was both characters, Jack and Wendy, are mischaracterized in the movie, in his opinion.
But I will say this, like, every single film that Stephen King has had, like, any input into, like, of films that are being translated over from one of his works, turns out, like, pretty bad. Like, almost all of them. Like, Maximum Overdrive, that's, like, the Stephen King movie, is not very good. I mean, I still love it. I still love it to death, but, like...
Have you read that novel, or...?
No, but the movie is just, like, objectively not that good.
Well, apparently he says he was so high on cocaine that he doesn't even remember writing that, but...
Sure, but same with Cujo.
So I would imagine the novel... I don't know. Maybe the novel's awesome. Who knows?
I mean, the novel probably is worthwhile, but the movie's not that good. And my point being is, like, Stephen King can hate this all he wants, but, like, Kubrick was a better filmmaker. And I hate... It's the best of King's works translated to film.
Exactly, and I mean... Yeah, exactly. So going back to the plot...
So
he's talking to Delbert Grady through the door, and all of a sudden you see the door unlock, and he lets him out. And he's like, finish your mission.
So this is like...
Or whatever.
This is the first physical paranormal event. Braden and I have talked about it before, and like maybe Danny let him out or whatever, but I just don't think that's realistic, because Wendy probably has scooped up Danny and is trying to get the fuck out of Dodge.
I just think it's possible. It's possible.
I'll accept possible. But this, otherwise, outside of that scenario, is the first time we see something physically manifest, other than room 237 being unlocked. And this is, I think, even more definite, because, like, he was locked in there, everybody else is trying to get out, and something undoes the lock, deshackles it, and then pulls it off of the eye of the, thing that the lock had been run through, and he gets out. So about this time, also, Dick Halloran has been... He received the message from Danny, and has been like frantically trying to get in touch with the hotel and has gone to the lengths of booking a flight back to Colorado and has made arrangements to get a snowcat to like make it up to the overlook. And like in his drive up, there's a scene where there's a tanker, an 18-wheeler flipped over and it's crushed a red beetle bug. Yep. In the novel, the family car of the Torrances was a red beetle bug, and apparently that was like a point of contention because Kubrick wanted it to be a yellow beetle bug.
Probably just as a fuck you to Stephen King.
Yeah, and so as an additional fuck you to Stephen King, he had a red beetle bug crushed in like the backdrop, basically, as like a final like this is mine. Go blow me.
Contentious, man.
Yeah,
exactly.
So yeah, I mean, definitely maybe some genius pissing contests going on there a little bit. But I mean,
so this guy's coming to the rescue.
He's coming to the rescue. You know, we're getting into the meat and potatoes, like the really. We keep saying iconic scene. I've said it so many times. Again, they're all iconic, but
they're all iconic. The whole film.
When Wendy's trying to get like everything together, and there's the red rum scene where Tony's saying red rum, red rum, red rum, red rum, and she walks in. She looks in the mirror and she sees red rum written on the door, but backwards, red rum is murder.
Creepy little bastard. I don't know. I probably would have locked him in the pantry too.
Yeah, I'm out. Sorry. You two deserve each other. No, that's terrible.
If a kid comes at me like that, man, I'm swinging.
So she has the door locked, and Jack starts to try to like force his way in, and they like get into the bathroom. I think it's the bathroom, and Jack and Wendy manage to slide out, but not before, or not Jack and Wendy. Danny and Wendy manage to slide out, but not before Jack hatchets open the door and sticks his head in and says, "Here's Johnny," which I believe is a reference to Johnny Carson.
That is the Tonight Show.
Yeah, the Tonight Show. Yeah. Gosh, I'm glad that was right.
Improvised by Jack Nicholson, by the way.
Improvised. Gosh, brilliant, man.
Yep. Classic. Exactly. And he's telling them he's going to chop them into tiny pieces.
Yeah. Which...
Danny manages to slide out of the window.
Yes.
And does she get out of the window also?
Yes, she does. So then we see, like, Dick Halloran has now made it up to the overlook, and he's walking through kind of the... I guess hotel foyer, the lobby, that's the right word. And he's like looking around. I think he calls out, and in one of the few jump scares I would say of the whole film, Jack pops out from around a pillar and gets him in the chest with an axe. With the axe. Boom. So
he's out.
Yeah, they're like one hope of escaping is there. And actually, no, I don't think Wendy gets out through the window. I think Jack goes down because the snowcat's pulled up.
I see.
So Wendy's like trying to escape at this point. She's like running down the hotel, and there's like all these. This is like one of the weirder scenes for most people, especially like. I mean, I guess it's all kind of weird, pretty far out. But when she's like making her way down the stairwell, she like looks through, like one doorway, and there's the scene with the guy in the dog suit.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Again, another like sexual tension moment placed within this horror. There's a guy in a dog suit.
Yeah, one of the main characters in the book is, or not main characters, but one of like the main side chapter characters in the book is this like socialite or whatever, who he is a homosexual, but he's got like this one lover who he just basically like demeans. It's like almost like a BDSM relationship before that was really a thing, but it's like much crueler. Like the guy's like just so desperately in love with him that he tolerates a lot of abuse, and like I believe, I hope I'm not getting this wrong from memory, but the whole dog suit thing was like a sexually demeaning, act or whatever.
In the book, interesting.
Yeah,
well, that kind of illuminates that because they don't explain it at all.
No,
all
no,
you see is just a guy in a dog suit sucking off another dude, and then they look up in surprise.
Correct. And like it's really strange because, as you said, there's like literally no other mention or reference or anything to like those characters throughout the rest of the film.
But is it just me, or every time I see that scene, I think John Candy and Spaceballs? I don't know why. I think the costume is
It's the ears, dude.
Reminiscent.
I mean, I guess all the costume, but yeah, it is basically...
Every single time I just see John Candy, I think it's John Candy.
That's a fair thing to think, I think. But then she sees like a series of horrifying weird things running down. She gets to like the base floor. There's like skeletons and cobwebs everywhere. You know the scene?
Oh yeah, that part's weird because as far as the realism of the rest of the film, that part it just looks, I don't know. That part's a little bit cheesy compared to the rest, but I heard one argument that it sets up what is about to happen.
Agreed.
The skeletons, I mean, nothing's moving in there. It's just the whole room's filled with skeletons in chairs covered with cobwebs.
Yeah, it almost like, I mean, I understand this came out way after, but it reminds me of like the Tower of Terror at Disney World or the subsequent, I think, short movie they had. Anyways, yeah, I mean, it doesn't, I'm not going to say it doesn't make sense because I still like that scene. I love everything about this movie. But it is strange.
It's a little out of place, but nothing's out of place because it's Stanley Kubrick.
Correct. So we get to the chase scene at the end where Jack follows Danny into the hedge maze, which we didn't talk about earlier, but it's cool. There's a big hedge maze, creepy ass
giant
hedge
maze. At one point they showed from a helicopter, and it is huge. It is
huge.
And I believe that was a real hedge maze. I could be wrong about that.
No, I think it is. Should have looked that up before the show. But so Jack chases Danny into it. So, Danny, through a little bit of like child genius, and I guess having explored the hedge maze some, lures Jack in and then starts like basically dusting over his tracks with like a branch or whatever, to like hide where his footprints were to disorient his dad. And
yeah, that part was wild. I mean, I still couldn't. Yeah, I mean, I guess he must have covered a lot of tracks.
He did.
But yeah, the footsteps essentially end, and then Jack's like, huh?
Yeah, so Jack gets, Danny escapes, gets out of the hedge maze. He and Wendy get in Dick Halloran's snowcat and get out. They get gone, as they should. And Jack gets to cool off for a little while. He slowly gets winded, and then the effects of hypothermia from the, brutal Colorado winter weather outside slowly cause him to just kind of peter out.
Yep, and he freezes.
Yeah, he tuckered himself out and he froze to death. And then we get the scene where it flashes to his face and he's all frozen in place in the hedge maze.
And that kind of cuts to a scene where he has become part of a photo from 1926 where he's at that party.
Ba, 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 da, ba, ba.
And that's the end.
Yeah, that is the end. That's the end of the movie. But yeah, he's like now pictured front and center of like the 1924 spring gala or whatever the fuck they had going on there.
And he looks insane in the photo.
He looks happy. He looks like he's having a good time. His hairline looks better in that scene than the rest of the movie. I will say that. So yeah, again, like back to like the being absorbed into the fabric of the hotel thing. Do you got any other like subliminal messages that you like particularly remember that stand out to you from the movie? We talked about a couple.
So this movie, probably more than any other I can think of, has been picked apart. There are people who have done all this numerology on it, and there are all sorts of theories about what different things mean and different symbolism that's put into the movie by Stanley Kubrick.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so there's a few fun ones that have been put out there. One interesting one is basically that the whole thing has something to do with the Native American genocide.
Yeah.
Have you heard about this one?
Yeah, like
It has to do with
the Calumet
those cans,
yeah.
like you mentioned earlier, the Calumet cans.
Yep.
Well, at the beginning, they're talking about how the hotel was built on an ancient Indian burial ground. And then, obviously a major theme throughout the movie is like the massacre of this dude's family. But also, throughout the entire film, placed everywhere, just different Native American iconography, paintings, designs. In the pantry, there's very specifically, there are a bunch of Indians around him, and the cans actually change. So one of the crazier theories is that at the beginning of the movie, there's just one Indian can, and it's faced directly at the camera, representing like fair and square treaties with the Native Americans. And then later on, all of the cans are turned away. None of them are facing at the camera, and now there's like 6 or 7. And someone's idea in that documentary, Room 237, was that maybe this represented bad Indian treaties or something that were broken, which I don't know. That seems like a little bit of a stretch to me.
Yeah, I mean, maybe
no matter what, there's a lot of Indian stuff going on in this film.
Yeah, a lot of Native American stuff pretty much just adorned throughout the hotel. An additional, I guess, point to that, the UK poster for the theatrical release of the movie had the caption, "The tide of terror that swept America is here." Which again, like Room 237 would suggest that the tide of terror was American expansionism west, as we, more or less genocided the Native Americans and conquered the land that we now know as America.
Exactly. And another idea that some people have and have read into this movie is that it could be about the Jewish Holocaust. And Stanley Kubrick was himself Jewish. And like, for instance, at one point they have, early on in the movie when there's people in the lobby, they have a cut scene where it goes from like a family walking and they just turn into bags. Like it fades into the next scene. And someone was pointing out like, oh, there's photographs of all the bags of the people who went on the trains to the concentration camps. They were left behind. Take all of these with a grain of salt, because they're just things people have read into the movie. As far as the Native American Holocaust goes, I mean, that seems kind of obvious when you really look at all the evidence.
I'd say that seems more plausible and more fitting, especially with it like being in the state of Colorado. And again, just like with how much of the hotel's decor is, themed.
Native American themed.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the more far out theories is, so in the actual hotel, I guess in the novel it takes place in room 217.
Mm-hmm.
And in the movie, Stanley Kubrick changed it to 237. And apparently the reason for this was so that guests would not be too afraid to stay in room 217.
Ah.
But one of the deeper conspiracy theories, it ties into the moon landing conspiracy
back to
theory.
the Apollo 11 sweater. The Apollo 11 sweater.
Here's where we get real deep. Here's where we go off the deep end with this shit. But
yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
So, I mean, a popular conspiracy theory is that Stanley Kubrick actually filmed the moon landing, and it was done on like a sound stage, and then if it did happen, that's not actual footage of it happening. And like, this is a conspiracy theory that is very enduring over the years. Like,
people love it. I love it.
I love it too, because it's just fun, and we don't actually know. And some of the things that they point out kind of hold water, in my opinion.
I would say so. I'm not trying to say the moon landing was fully faked. I'm not going to bite in that hard, but, it could be. It definitely could be.
I mean, we had every reason to do it.
Yeah, sure.
And why haven't we gone back?
Why hasn't anybody gone back?
Exactly.
I'm tired of the answer, like, oh, there's nothing worthwhile to be ascertained scientifically. And it's like, dude, you You broke from Earth's gravity, set up a lunar launch base to get to Mars. You know, whatever.
Whatever.
And then also some jabloni from NASA was like, we lost the technology to remake the lunar lander, and it would be too difficult to rebuild. It's like, dude, you're telling me that we have like supercomputers in our pockets, but like you can't rebuild a fucking spacecraft that was built, 60 years ago with all the
in the 1960s
with all the advances we've had in material sciences. I don't believe it. Horseshit.
Also, I mean, we're getting way in the weeds here,
yeah.
but I saw a video
Deeply.
of Buzz Aldrin saying, "Yeah, we never went there." Of course, he did look totally senile and might not have even known where he was.
Well, it happens to us all if you live long enough, I suppose. Anyways,
Exactly.
Buzz Aldrin's an American hero. We salute him here at Far Out Flicks.
Yes, exactly. Whether he won or not. But so the moon is 237 thousand miles away from Earth.
That sounds right.
Is that what it is?
I think so. I don't know.
Is that what it is?
Sounds good enough to me.
I feel like I should check that.
Roll with it.
238,000.
Oh, that was actually a
All
surprise.
right.
Yeah, you get an A. A+.
So, room 237.
Yep.
Apparently it's 238,900 miles, but maybe in 1980 we thought it was 237,000 miles.
Or maybe NASA just changed it to obscure.
There are some people who believe that that the entire film is basically Stanley Kubrick's way of coping with his knowledge that the moon landing was faked, and that he's like secretly has coded messages basically telling us this information. But room 237,000 miles from the Earth is the moon. Basically, at a certain point when Wendy's like questioning about his work and all this stuff, I mean, I don't know. That would be a lot of pressure to have to keep that secret from even your wife. And maybe this was his way of kind of dealing with it. Which, I don't know, seems a little far out there, but I mean, if you're going to film the moon landing, who else would you get to do it?
Yeah, I mean, you'd get the best, right?
And I mean, I saw a video of a guy who was like analyzing the moon landing footage, and he was saying that's a projection screen. Like, that's how Stanley Kubrick filmed 2001: A Space Odyssey, which at that time was like cutting edge special effects,
Yeah, it was the best of the best. It was
It's plausible. I'm going to mark that as plausible.
plausible. I'm going to keep, same. Glad we're in agreement about that.
We're in agreement about that. So we got these different theories. Now, Stephen King, he had kind of different themes in mind. His is more about like alcoholism and like family stuff. And basically that's why he was so pissed off. Because, I mean, Stanley Kubrick hijacked the story and used it to his own purposes, which, in my opinion, that should be allowed in art. I mean, that's kind of how it goes,
I think it's like pretty much the norm going from the page to the screen. Like, I mean, Hollywood's got so much more money than the printing agencies at this point. They're the ones who get to dictate the rules of those agreements.
Sure. I mean, do you think Stephen King's just a little butthurt that like the movie was more popular than the book too?
I often think that might be the truth. And in like the ending of the book, Jack's killed like when the boiler explodes or whatever. Whatever. Womp womp. I guess it's okay. I like him freezing to death in the hedge maze way better.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I'll go with that. And apparently, at the end of the book, there is no hedge maze. It's like, what is it? Landscaped hedge animals that come alive or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
Yeah. I don't know. Good movie, though.
Excellent
we enjoyed
movie.
it. We had a lot of fun watching it.
And we hope you had a lot of fun. Thanks for joining us, coming back. Again, sorry for the little break period there. Everybody's got to have a little break. We're going to do it seasonally. I mean,
we'll do it seasonally. We're back,
fucking
though.
TV shows do it. Why can't we?
It auto-renewed, so here we are.
So here we are, churning them out again. Well, guys, thank you for joining us here at Far Out Flicks. Like, subscribe, tell your friend, leave a review, tell us what you're thinking, tell us what you want. It's what we want.
Yeah, just leave us a comment, just let us know you listened to it, because, I don't know, sometimes it just seems like we're sending these out into space. Who knows? Who knows who's gonna listen?
Yeah, if you like it, let us know.
I think we should beam it out to space for the aliens to find.